Okay, given this larger argument of the second treatise, how will Locke decide between the competing claims of the extent of the executive powers? Um, Before we can answer that, first to break down the prompts, not restate it, but break it down. Pretty much one side is saying that the executive branch has unlimited power, and the other one is saying that it is limited and they cannot do what they're trying to do here. And Locke would support the side that is saying that the executive branch is limited in their power. Um, and it's clearly seen in his second treatise of government, and that's what we're going to be using to answer this question. Um, to explore on a deeper level, the second treatise of government it provides a framework for political authority and the limits on governmental power. Um, Governmental power. What is governmental power? Political power. In essence, he says it early. The political power that I take to be a right of making laws with penalties of death and consequently all less penalties for the regulating and the preserving of property and of employing the force of the community in execution of such laws and in the defense of the Commonwealth for foreign inquiry, and all this only for the public good. How did he get there? He got there by the guiding question of the second treatise. And the guiding question is the legitimacy of government. Like, what is the legitimacy of government? What makes it legitimate? And how do they get the legitimacy? But to get there, you first have to understand why government was created in the first place. But before you can do that, you have to understand the state men were in before, and that is the state of nature. And the state of nature, I'm just going to read the quote real quick. To understand political power right, derived from this original, we must consider what state all men are naturally in, and that is a state of perfect freedom to order their actions and dispose of their possessions and persons as they think fit, within the bounds of law and nature, without asking leave or depending upon the will of any other man. A state also of equality, wherein all the power and jurisdiction is reciprocal, no one having more than another. There being nothing more evident than that creatures of the same species and rank, promiscuously born to all the same advantages of nature, and the use of the same faculties, should also be equal one amongst another without subordination or subjection, unless the Lord and Master of them all should by manifest declaration of his will set one above another, and confer on him by an evident and clear appointment an undoubted right to dominion and sovereignty. That's the last quote I'm going to quote, like, for the whole thing. Everything else I'm going to summarize. But what is that pretty much saying? It's saying that the state of nature is a hypothetical condition that individuals exist in without government that is characterized by freedom, equality, and governed by the moral law of nature. Why do we lead this though? Why do they lead that state? They lead that state to enter from a law of nature to a civil society. And government was created to better protect our natural rights and resolve disputes impartially, unbiased, and establish a framework for collective security and cooperation. That is important because it kind of gets to how Locke created the government in his head and why he did everything the way he did. What are the natural rights? What are the natural rights in the social contract? We all have the natural rights of life found in this state of nature. And those natural rights of life, liberty and property, not just like this table and this chair, but the things that we bring labor into, the things that we create to an extent that it is ours, that we have the right to our property, the property of our life, and things that entail. And that is simply why the government was created. Then government is supposed to be separated. There's supposed to be a separation of powers. You have your legislature, then you have your executive. Legislation, it's creating the law. It's setting this fair, this just law, and the executive branch is executing it and making sure it is followed to the best of its ability. But the executive power, it has to have limits. The executive power is derived by the consent of the governed. Little example, if no one is listening to them, they don't have any power. We are I'm going to use words like almost surrendering under the control and abiding by the laws, but it's at our will, because that's how these revolts and these rebellions happen, because we don't want to do it anymore. And then you have revolutions like the American Revolution, which is how we created a new government, right? But it is used to enforce the laws created by this legislative body, and it is to uphold this rule of law. To correlate this back to the prompt, the rule of law we are allowed, well, we have the right to a fair trial. So, logically speaking here, objectively speaking here, based off of this prompt, if the executive branch were to kill this man without a fair trial, in essence, it's tyranny. It is an abuse of power. And I think the point I'm about to make right here kind of makes the whole argument of why Locke would choose a side that puts limit on the government. Um, if they were to do that, it sets precedent. It sets precedent, which leads to tyranny. The precedent that they don't need a fair trial and they can just do things, but they cannot do that. And that is what, not having that trial violates the natural rights that we are given as human beings. And inherently, that is why, right here, okay, pretty much, yeah, okay. And that is why it would be a violation. So, summarize the whole argument. He broke it down to your state of nature, which is the state of nature led to why government was created. Then that's what government is legitimate by the people that completely surrender to it. And then he broke it down through our natural rights, the social contract we all agreed to. We separate the powers to keep from tyranny from happening, and we limit the executive powers so we don't have abuse of power. So killing that man sets a precedent which leads to tyranny, and overall that is why John Locke would agree with the side saying we limit the executive power.